I may have to leave at any moment. You know, my kid, because I have to play chauffeur.
Oh, not having a baby or
Chair Ed, can you hear us?
24.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, we're ready to roll.
Okay.
Autistic.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not yet reviewed, if you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. The city of Milwaukee respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Calapooya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. I'd just like to take a moment and offer our silence in honor of the Clackamas people. Thank you. There are no commission minutes for consideration this evening, so we'll move on. Are there any informational items from staff?
There are not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is an opportunity to comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Does any audience member wish to comment on an item that is not on tonight's commission agenda? And if you are participating virtually, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to indicate that you wish to make a comment, or if you're dialed in, please dial *9 to indicate that you'd like to make a comment.
We don't have anybody online, Chair Edge.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to our work session item. Now we'll move on to the annual joint meeting with the Neighborhood District Association. Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. Let's see, I don't have the agenda handy for tonight. Laura, could you give a brief overview of the agenda really quick?
I can certainly do that. We're gonna welcome you. Welcome. Hey, everybody. And then we're going to do some introductions. I'm going to go through some development projects here in the city that are happening, including some middle housing developments that are going on. Then we're going to kind of do a land use review overview, both for the NDAs, and also we've got 3 brand new planning commissioners at the table. So it's kind of a joint meeting to understand the land use review, talk a little bit about the resources for the NDAs, and then we're going to wrap it up. That's it.
Awesome, thank you, Laura. And now I do have that agenda queued up. It was right there, but thank you for offering that summary. So before we hear from staff, I'd like the NDA members in attendance to introduce themselves and to state the name of their NDA. And again, if you're participating via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom to indicate that you'd like to speak. And so I think we'll just go around the room.
I'll start, or not. I'm Charles.
Yeah, please.
Not. I say not.
Okay. Charles Bird with Island Station, NDA. Chair.
I'm Debbie Lipton with Historic Milwaukee, NDA co-chair.
Val Hubbard with Historic Milwaukee, co-chair. Lila Bronson with JC Ardenwald, secretary.
Wayne Rollins, and I'm also with Ardenwald.
Got a member there on the screen, and Mr. Hemer, if you'd like to say hello.
Been a while. Linwood, NDA land use.
Well, welcome everybody. So I think now, Will, it's great to see you again, Greg, by the way. It's been a long time. So now Planning Manager Laura Weigel will present some updates from the Planning Department and provide an overview of the land use process.
And I think before I hop right into that, I'd like to give everybody on the Planning Commission just a moment to introduce themselves as well, and just kind of.
Yeah, I think this is a great time for that, Laura. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And maybe it would be helpful to say when you've been on the when you got on the Planning Commission, and maybe what neighborhood association. We're here with the NDA folks tonight. So, Nick, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Nick Hess. I have this is my first Planning Commission meeting, so happy to be here and excited to learn along with you tonight. I'm living in the Ardenwald neighborhood.
My name is Lisa Fraser. I've been on the planning commission since like July of last year, and I live in the Lakewood neighborhood.
And I'm Laura Weigel. I'm the planning manager here at the city of Milwaukee, and I have been here now for almost 4.5 years.
Hi everyone, Jacob Sherman, AZ and pronouns. Been on the planning commission 4.5 years, I think, and live in the Ardenwald neighborhood and occasionally make it to Ardenwald NDA meetings as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Max Bennick. I've been on the planning commission since November of last year, and I live in historic Milwaukee.
My name is Ryan Lauther. I have been on the planning commission since last month, so this is my second meeting. So I'm one of the new ones. I live in Lake Road, just right up the street. So.
Also, the chair, Edge, if you want to introduce yourself, and then I've got 2 more folks in the room that have also just stepped in. And then also we've got Commissioner Garvey here as well.
Yeah, I was going to offer to Commissioner Garvey the opportunity to introduce herself first.
Hi, everybody. I'm in beautiful Spokane, Washington right now, so I'm sorry that I could not see you all in person. But I have been on the commission now 2 months, and I have lived, I'm in the Lake Road neighborhood, and I've lived there since 1998.
Thank you. And my name is Joseph Edge. I'm the chair. This is my first meeting as chair, although I have served as vice chair before and have chaired several meetings in the past. This is my first officially serving as the chair. And I'm joining by Zoom tonight because I am caring for some family members who are immunocompromised, and I need to be very cautious about being out in public while I'm caring for them. So thank you everybody for allowing me that. I actually live in the Oak Grove neighborhood, just to the south of the city limits, but I've served on the planning commission since 2018, and this is and I've served on several committees and everything around the comprehensive plan and the advisory committee and implementation committees and the transportation system plan advisory committee. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Laura.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. I've got 3 more folks in the room that I'd like to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. And I know Maitri, if you all can squeeze it around the table, if you want to come on up, that would be awesome. Just want to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I was literally home for like 5 minutes, so I kind of need to eat something. I'm a dedicated Milwaukeean, let you know. I am Maitri Dormeyer with the Llewellyn NDA Land Use Chair, and I'm also on the Transportation System Advisory Committee and Bike Milwaukee. So, hi.
Hello, and then I'm sorry, I don't know you, sir. If you would like to.
Hi, I'm Steve Smith. I'm with the Ardenwald Johnson Creek NDA. I'm currently the webmaster and I run the newsletter. This is my first time doing one of these, so I'm just here to learn.
Awesome, thank you. Jason, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Jason Wax, I'm the city's community engagement. And I'm the liaison to all of the wonderful NDAs, which is why I'm here just listening in.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is a great opportunity to just get everybody together in the same room and be able to ask some of the same questions. And so what I will do is I will just hop right into my presentation and then feel free to ask questions as we go along. That's what we're here for, is to just kind of learn together, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And with that, I'm going to ask, and Vera Kolias, who is over here in the room, holding down the presentation. She is one of the senior planners here at the city. So if you have not met her, you will at some point. Vera is everywhere, and she does all the things. She really does. And so thank you for being here tonight, Vera. Okay, you can skip this one because we've already been there. Oh, and it works for me. I can do it. Okay, maybe we'll see if it works. I don't know. I guess I'll try it out. Okay, I'm just going to stand up because I feel better when I stand up. Okay, I stand up all the time. Okay, so land use planning, right? It's a lot of things. We will talk about how our land is used, right? That's one way to think about land use planning. All different types of developments in different areas of the city. How are we using our land? Making sure we're using our land efficiently. It's building and site design. So how are you building the buildings? Where do they sit on the site? Where are they in relation to their neighbors? Where are you in relation to other buildings on the street? It's transportation. When somebody said, Maitri said she's on the Transportation System Plan Advisory Committee, we're looking at how are we building out our bike infrastructure, our pedestrian infrastructure? How are we thinking about our roads and our intersections and how we're intersecting transit? That's all land use as well, right? And then also things like natural resources. We have to manage natural resources in the state. And so looking at where our floodplains are and we don't manage tree protection through the planning department, but we do the natural resources. And so it's a lot of different things and there's lots of different ways that we approach it. And so tonight we're going to talk kind of about what it looks like day to day, looking at development review, because that's a big part of what the Planning Commission does and what you all get involved with. And there's also projects that take much longer time, and it's not what's being built right now, but thinking about plans for the future. Oh, yes, let's see. Last time I learned the magic of turning the clicker on. So we'll learn that again. I learned slowly, but I get there eventually. Okay, so two things. We're going to talk about development review and long-range planning. Okay, so let's start with, so we did, thank you so much, Jason. There was a, it's clicking without me. No, it just kept going, didn't it? Sorry, well. Listen, what are you doing over there, Vera? I'm not touching it. Okay. So first thing, thanks so much, Jason. Earlier, like last fall, we had talked about doing this meeting last fall, and we ended up not being able to do it because there was just all these shifting things, including a lot of planning commissioners leaving. And so anyway, we're here now. But Jason did the survey last fall, and one of the things that people really wanted to hear about was projects that are going on in the city. So I thought that I would give you kind of an overview of the bigger projects that are going on. And if you have any questions about other big projects that I don't mention here, just ask, and I will do my best to answer your questions. And so the first thing, obviously, Hillside. Does everybody know where the new Hillside development is in the city? Yes, everybody knows that, right?
How can you miss it?
I know, how can you miss it, right? And so the great thing is that it's phase one. They're really going gangbusters now. They came in 2021 for land use approval. So, you go through a process. This is one of the applications that was seen by the Planning Commission and was sent out for notice and sent out to the NDA so folks could have the opportunity to and so they're finally building it now, and it's 275 apartments in this phase of it. Ultimately, there will be 600 units there, including the tower that already exists. They're income restricted units. They're about at 30 to 60% average family income. And there's going to be additionally supportive services on site. So it's wraparound services, and then folks should start moving in 2026. They are currently in the process of looking for funding, continuing to look for funding for phase two. So with affordable housing developments, it's always really tough to find the funding. It takes a lot of partners coming together to make it happen. So a lot of folks were involved in this, and so they're still looking for more funding moving forward. But the goal is ultimately to have 600 units there. Then Bonaventure, I don't know if you all have seen that development. It's down off Rusk Road, north Clackamas County, the big park down there. And so this is a new, they came in for approval many years ago. They went through the land use process even before I got here in 2020. And they're finally getting it built. So this is great amenity for the city, I think, because there's 170 senior units here. So it's independent living. It's one of those called continuum of care facilities. There's independent living, and then there's assisted living, and then there's also memory care units. So I was just out there today. I took this picture today. So I don't know what their timeline is for opening it, but I would say sometime this summer, it seems like. And if any of you all are looking for places like that, for anyone you know,
Myself, maybe.
There you go. I'm looking for my mom right now. So I was like, oh, get out there. There are trailers out there. They're talking about, they have a person out there that can tell you about that place. It looks really nice.
Laura,
Yes, sir.
is there any timeline on land use approval?
There is timelines on land use approval. And so it's a 2-year timeline. And if you don't start, then basically you have to come back in and start over. Or you have to, Vera, do you want to say something? See, this is why I bring
Does the city
Vera.
also administratively extend?
We can
Which has
extend.
happened in some instances.
Thank you, Jane.
Like with Coho Point, case in point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Generally, for land use approvals that have a development permit process, so within 2 years, you need to have pulled permits and paid for them and begun construction. And then within 4 years, there's supposed to be certificate of occupancy, and we've closed out the project. So that way we can keep projects moving, but we do have an extension process that can happen to keep things moving that way if
Is
things
the
come up. So
extension open-ended? Like,
they are timed, but you can have multiples of them.
and is there a
So-
cap on that?
Nope, that's a planning manager decision, but generally they need to submit, the why and what's happening, and so we can
And
keep
generally, they give
projects.
good reasons for why they need to extend it. So like case in point, Bonaventure took a while to get off the ground. That happened at the beginning of COVID. And so I think that there was a lot of just things going on and they weren't ready to go at that time. Coho, this is the place at McLaughlin and Washington. And these are just the renderings here, right? But this is a partnership we've been working on building with them, doing the project with them. And they have been going through some FEMA regulations and requirements and working through what they have to do with the floodplain. So that's taken a while. And it was also approved during COVID and things kind of sat for a little while. And then there was the FEMA thing. And so it's been a slow roll, but the idea is that I think they're trying to break ground this year. And that's going to be a really big project. So that's the one that's going to be across the street from Axle Tree. And those will also, there's 195 units, and then 10% of those units will also be affordable units at 80% for 30 years. So that's another big project that hopefully will be coming online in the next couple of years. Then, right next door, yes, the food park, the 1847 food park, also came before the Planning Commission fairly recently. And they have been over there doing some site work. And so we don't know, we haven't heard when they're really gonna get rolling. But I would imagine that they would probably be in high development over the summer. So that's coming online. Then there's one more project that I didn't add on here. It's where the old Chase Bank used to be. That's coming down, and that's going to be turned into a 4-story unit with 45 units on that site. So it's just going to be residential. Yes, ma'am.
Question about parking with that one. We haven't heard anything about that. It's a
Parking-
big topic in our neighborhood.
Yeah. And so just so you know, the city cannot require parking.
I thought none. Can't
None,
require any.
citywide, we are not allowed to require any parking. That said, why is that? Because of the state and because we have climate goal reductions, and the governor passed the climate friendly equitable communities legislation several years ago with the idea of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so the idea, and also, so it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but then also stop using land to park cars when we can use that to have housing, because our costs of housing are so high and we don't have enough housing. So there's a lot of factors that went into that state legislation.
Laura, but there are bike parking requirements, right?
Bike parking requirements, yes, there are. bike parking
Because
requirements.
I, this is a thing for me.
Really?
I have noticed that we have these nicely marked public parking lots in downtown, but we have inadequate bike parking still. And in fact, they took out bike parking at the old city hall. So I just want to know what's going on there.
Yeah,
So
I hear you. We will continue to, we'll continue to have that conversation. It's an important conversation.
yes.
Yes.
We've got people in our neighborhood that are concerned about, was it a small house development on 29th?
Yeah.
And the streets are not designed for, a lot of parking, and there's no sidewalks. And so people are concerned about being able to get to the front of their houses, driveways being blocked, mailboxes being blocked, and they feel like they're just kind of stuck.
Yeah. So I know the cottage cluster that you're talking about, and I think that 29th is kind of a unique street in that over time, it's meant to be a city bikeway, right? So some improvements are going to be made over time to improve the street. It's also probably one of those streets that may never have sidewalks, because the idea is that it's a shared pathway because we try to keep everybody slow. But there will be improvements over time to kind of have the demarcation to do better along the parking areas, because people are still gonna park there, obviously, people do.
Yeah.
But if people are, you can block mailboxes, that's not illegal. So if there's a problem, I mean, you can block mailboxes, people can park in front of those. People can't block driveways. So if somebody's parking in front of your driveway, you can always contact code enforcement. And we will be ultimately, as part of that development, getting what we call fee in lieu of building something, right? So some places in town, you have to do frontage improvements along with your development, right? You have to build out a sidewalk. Or you can choose to pay into a fee the amount that would be required to actually build that section. And some folks choose to do fee in lieu of, we call it fee lock here, because what we're trying to avoid all over the city is having just stretches of sidewalk that's built that is not consistent, right? Because Milwaukee's really built out, right? So we don't know how long it's gonna take. I mean, who knows how long 29th or what will happen over time, right? We don't know how long that's gonna take, or even how much of it will ever redevelop, right? And so people will pay, those folks that are building that little cottage cluster, they'll pay a fee in lieu of, and that fee in lieu of is meant to be applied to projects in that particular neighborhood association. So it's not a perfect solution, and 29th isn't gonna be perfect. It's not perfect now, nor will it be after the cottage cluster is built.
But is there anything to stop people from parking like right in front of the walkways up to the front of their houses?
No. It's because it's public right of
You know,
way.
we have talked a little bit, and maybe it's something to talk more about on the transportation system plan. I mean, the issue of people parking in front of people's mailboxes means in a lot of Milwaukee, where the mail carriers are still delivering out of their trucks as opposed to walking, it means you don't get your mail delivered.
Yeah.
And like, that's a real issue. And maybe we need to think about, I know working with the US Postal Service is not the easiest thing, but maybe we need to think about that as a transportation system plan policy, to work with the Postal Service to try and consolidate mailboxes or move to, you know, we're not a rural place
Not anymore, yeah.
right?
Yeah, that is
And
part of
this
the
is gonna
problem.
continue to be an issue
Yeah.
until it gets addressed.
It is true, when you go into new developments that are built, when you go into the places that, where there is a lot of on-street parking, right? Because it's just allowed for everybody to park in front of other people's houses. They do have consolidated mailbox units, right, in new developments. And so, yes, working with the post office is incredibly, but that is something that we could consider moving forward and looking at trying to make that better.
So if somebody's parked in front of one of the residents, say driveway, and they can't get into their home, is there any way that they can call either the police or something to get that person moved?
Yeah, I believe it's a code enforcement issue. You call code.
So in other
which
words,
is part of the police department.
so in other words, it could take multiple days for it to happen?
I don't know the answer to how long it would take. I think the police are pretty responsive.
Yeah, but code enforcement, there's one person, or is it 1.5? There's two?
Two, yeah.
Okay, for a long time there was one, but
So
they don't
I
work
think-
24/7.
Yeah.
So I'm just, it was a long discussion this last meeting, so I'm,
Yeah, I think it's, I think change can kind of be challenging sometimes. There's going to just be more units in neighborhoods now. And so we're going to have to figure out, see how it's going to work, see what the challenges are, and when the challenges arise, then come up with solutions. But I think at the moment, like with that particular development, I believe it's potentially 6. I don't think they've landed on anything yet. They're still in the
I
conversation
thought it was a
phase.
lot higher than that.
I think
I thought it was 6. I
I might
wasn't
be wrong.
Do
But
you remember what she was saying?
I had heard 8.
8 or 6. I don't think it'll hold much, that site will hold much more than that. But I think the idea is that we're kind of in this learning phase. It's new that we're not requiring parking. It's new across the entire state. Milwaukee's completely built out. So there's going to be a little push and pull. It's not going to feel great all the time. But I think as long as we continue to have the dialogue and address anything that arises out of it and address it when it comes up, then we will continue to do our best to kind of find solutions as we see more of these little projects getting developed throughout the city. And I'm going to talk actually a little bit more about that Because now, one of the things is, so middle housing, which is exactly what you were talking about. Right?
Unfortunately, I gotta leave.
Okay, well, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I didn't know when this call was gonna come, but
Okay, good.
thanks.
Okay, thank you for being here. So what we wanted to do is just talk a little bit about the middle housing projects that are happening. So, as I said, this was also part, go ahead, yes.
Define middle housing for me?
Middle housing means cottage clusters. I'm going to show you some photos.
Okay.
Cottage clusters, and there's specific guidance around what a cottage cluster is. There's plexes, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and then there are townhouses. So those are what are technically considered middle housing types. And all of that happened, again, through the governor, through the state of Oregon, again, going back to, it's called House Bill 2001, and that was trying to address the housing crisis that's going on across the state. Enough units aren't getting built across the state, and so the governor wanted to look at how can we make more units get built faster. So one of the solutions was to allow for middle housing to be built in a lot more places. And so that is what so she says, you all have to allow this. You have to allow it by right. Okay, and if you allow it by right, that means there is no land use review. It doesn't come to the planning commission. It's same as building a single family house. If you want to build a single family house, you can build that by right as long as you follow the code. Right? So it's the same now for these types of developments. You can build that by right as long as you follow the standards in the code. And so the only time that we really get involved with any of these developments is one, if they want to do something that the code says you're going to need to get a variance for this. Say I want my setback to not be what the setback in the code says. Then they're going to need to come in, they need to fill out a land use application, they come to the planning commission, neighbors get notified. So we go through a process. The other way that people hear about middle housing before it gets developed is if there's some sort of land partition that needs to go on or a middle housing land development, when something is being done to divide up a piece of land that will allow these types of developments to happen, they have to follow a process to apply to be able to cut up the land in that way. Now, the tricky thing about this, and this has come up recently, and that's why I'm going to bring it up, is that comes through what we call a type 2 land use review. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But type 2 land use reviews do not go through the planning commission. They're basically kind of a ministerial land use review. And ultimately, if you meet the conditions that are outlined in the code, and the planning manager looks at that application and says, yes, you have met the conditions, the criteria in the code, then I recommend approval. And so, well, I approve it, and then the neighborhood gets noticed that it's happening. So there's kind of no recourse unless someone wants to say they don't agree with my application of the criteria. They say, you haven't looked at this application correctly. It doesn't meet the criteria. We want to appeal this to the planning commission. They can do that. But for the most part, every single one that we've seen so far has met the criteria in the code. And so therefore I have approved it, and we have not had any appeals up to this point. That may start to change. We're hearing some rumblings, but I will just tell you that if they meet the criteria, even if you decide that you want to bring it to the planning commission, the planning commission is going to approve it if they've met the criteria, because it's all based on criteria, which is the same is true for so many other things, and we're going to go through that because it's all about, I didn't bring my rule book. I usually bring in my big book so that I can be like, here's all the rules. And if folks meet the rules, then they kind of get to do what they want to do. It's when they don't meet the rules that there's more discretion involved in that. So, okay, so, yes.
Is 7 then not a middle housing? What is that if it goes to 7 units?
7 units is so cottage clusters can be more. Cottage clusters are different than a duplex, triplex, or quadplex. Cottage clusters, you can have a lot of cottage clusters. What it is though, is that there's provisions in the code that tell you how many cottages there can be in a row. Is it 4?
Up to 12.
Up to 12.
So townhouses, are limited to 4 in a row, then you have to be spaced, then there can be 4. Cottage clusters are anywhere between 3 and 12 cottages around a common green.
So then 12 is still middle housing.
Correct. Cottage cluster as a housing type is middle housing,
How
yes.
big is the lot? Is that important?
Well, the lot size ends up dictating how many units you can do.
We do have development standards for setbacks, for lot coverage. So a lot, for a cottage cluster, a lot has to be a minimum of 7,000 square feet.
Square footage on the cottage itself?
Cottages are limited to a footprint of 900 square feet.
And how about a minimum of?
There's no minimum, there's a maximum
Only max.
for size, correct, yes.
900 footprint, and then 1,400.
Average of 1,400 square feet for the entire cottage cluster. So they're intended to be small.
Oh, 1,400 tops for
For an average,
square footage?
yes,
It
correct.
could be tiny though.
It could
Yes,
be smaller.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so projects complete so far for the middle housing. That is, right now, we've got 16 units that are complete in the city. I've got a few examples up here. Boop. Okay, I don't know if you all have been past the cottage cluster on 40th. Why does it keep doing that? When? Okay, I'm not, see, okay, I'm just, anyway, so there's 6 units up on 40th. I don't know if you all have seen it. It's a really nice design. I think you did a really good job.
40th and, it's just south of Harvey.
Yeah. 6
Just
units.
north of King.
Yeah. Between King and Harvey.
Yeah. And although not required to provide parking, there is parking on site. So that's the thing, is like, you're gonna see a little bit of a split. Some developers are providing parking because they feel like they need to have parking in order to attract people to get the unit. And then other places are not providing parking. It's just kind of a mixture, it's kind of a mixed bag as to what that particular developer wants to do. So in this case, there is parking on site. Okay, we've got 5 townhouses, 52nd and Jackson. In this case, you can see that it's townhouses, but there's 3, and then they've split, and then there's 2, because that's as much room as they had on the site, right? And so as you can see with this, they've all got garages, and they've all got parking spaces. So even though there's 5 units, there's technically 10 parking spaces there for those units.
Do you know how big those units are? Like how many beds or rough square footage? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
They all sold very quickly, to be honest. I think the listings are still active if you want to look them up, but.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they do have that. I don't know that information. Okay. Then under construction, we've got some more units that are under construction. Another total 33 units are under construction in the city. And so on the left, you've got a 15-unit cottage cluster at Harvey Street, on Harvey Street. Those are affordable housing units, which is great. They're at 80%. They're going to be home ownership for people that are 80% of the average median income. And so they're also they don't have parking. They also are really interesting in that they're using CLT. What is this? It's certified?
Cross-laminated.
Cross-laminated timber, thank you, right. So this is kind of this prototype. They're trying to figure out how to build units that can be replicated in lots of places. It brings down the cost of construction. So this is a really, they're flying in pieces of timber. So this is meant to be a model for using this type of materials. They actually, they partnered, they got some money from the city to build this. So I think they got $200,000 out of the construction excise tax. So that's in process, and it's going to be home ownership units. Then we've got a quadplex going in at King Road. That's under development. Then we've got another 8-unit cottage cluster on Olson. That one does not have parking with it, correct? And those are just kind of a few of the things that you can see that's going on in the city right now. So we've got an additional 78 units under consideration right now. When I mean under consideration, so they've come in, they've talked to us, they've done site planning, they've even some, like one of the the one on Monroe, that's a big cottage cluster. I don't know if you have heard about it, but it was like 58 units have been under discussion, but that's kind of quieted down. We haven't heard anything about it lately. So this just means that people are talking about them, they're working through it, but haven't been approved, haven't come in for permits, any of those things, but they might be coming. And we are seeing more activity. We adopted the code, so after the governor issued the legislation that we needed to change our codes to allow for this type of housing, we worked through that code and made changes on the code with the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission really worked through that. And that was in May of 2022. And it just takes a little while because people aren't used to building these types of housing developments. So it took a while from actually adopting the code to where you really start to see units being built. There's just a little bit of a time delay. So we're mostly built out here in Milwaukee, obviously. So what you're going to see is redevelopment. And what we've seen is some places that have talked about keeping one of the houses on site and then building back behind the house. So, and then also not keeping the house and building more units. So there's been kind of like there's a variety of options that our people are choosing. And it's really kind of unpredictable of knowing how many units we'll get over time. And we're just going to keep monitoring it and tracking it and trying to understand what the impacts are to the city, and then, continue to have conversations about what we might need to do in the future, if we see problems arise, or if actually this just makes it more affordable for people to buy housing in the city, and it's a good opportunity for people to move here if they're looking for more housing choices.
Laura, what about the one, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna ask,
Yeah.
do you think maybe we can distribute additional copies
Yeah.
to some of the folks here?
Yeah, if you all, so this will give you all of the information, and you can just take one and pass it around. So if you look at the top part, you'll see that it says, these are the 16 units that I was talking about that are finished. These are the ones that are under construction, and these are the ones that are under consideration, okay? And so when you look at it, you can kind of see, did they come in for a land use approval? Is it rental or home ownership? If we don't know all of the information because we haven't been tracking all the information. How many parking spaces are associated with each of them? So that's what we know, that's in our known world at the moment, is on that spreadsheet. Yeah.
About the cluster of right-of-way building.
The clustered up.
The one off McBride, so it was approved. Yep, I did receive an email from the development team wondering about their timeline, because it sounded like they were going to need to submit for an extension for their land use approval. So we haven't seen plans or anything yet, so it sounds like they're going to need an extension before they start permits or anything.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and if you all ever have any questions about any of the projects, that's the other thing, it's just like, call us. We're happy to share information with you. That's what we're here for. Staff here, we're all super available, and wanting to give people as much information as they need. And the other thing, I just want to wrap it up with the current development projects, because we know that this is the highlight of the week, right? Okay, so, and I meant to get out today and take a real picture because the building looks so amazing. It's open, right? It's pouring down rain. I was like, okay, I'm not going out there. So frame opened on Monday, and I think somebody said the parking lot was completely full, right? So
full, yeah.
Exciting. And then Keeper Coffee opened at 7 a.m. on Monday, and there was a line out the door from at least 7:30 to 9:30.
I just went to Wild Horse.
We were gonna go, and we're like, we can't sit in that line, right? So it's amazing. So this is really super exciting. Fantastic for the city. I'm just so happy to see City Hall. This is like a great example of historic resource being reused, and I'm just so glad. And they've done an amazing job.
It's so beautiful. I can just move in. It is so beautiful.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm gonna crawl under a table and just never come out.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Before I move on, it's occurring to me, Vera, that we have people online, and we might want to check in with them to see if they have any questions or want to have add any comments. I'm sorry, you all that are online, I can't see you on my screen, and that's just that's a little unfortunate in this situation. So we're gonna get Vera to check in with you all.
So Laura, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So with Coho going in, with retail space that they're gonna have, does the city have any kind of rules or regulations to where it's not gonna be another situation where we have completely vacant retail spaces like Axle Tree?
No, because we're not the people that are buying the spaces, right? So the market has to want the space. And so I think that in the more expensive buildings, like Axle Tree is probably one of those where the retail spaces are a little bit more expensive, right? I think Axle Tree has also been kind of careful about who they're renting it to because leases are long. So you want to be sure that you get tenants in there.
But those have been vacant
For a long
years.
They have.
Can you remind us, is there requirements kind of in downtown about ground floor retail? Or I know Chase is going to be
They're all
almost all residential.
Mm-hmm.
So is there an option in downtown for all residential on certain streets or not?
There is an option for all residential on streets.
On all streets or?
No, it's not on all streets.
No, buildings fronting on Main Street are required to have a first floor active space. So first floor residential is not permitted on buildings facing Main Street. So those would need to be mixed use buildings or residential on the upper floors. The Chase Bank building will be actually coming before the Planning Commission in May. They're asking for one of the downtown design review elements to be based upon the guidelines, not the standards. And I thought there was a parking question. So there is an existing parking lot as part of that site. So they are retaining 17 parking spaces within that parking lot. And they will have 45 bike parking spaces. They will have a dedicated bike room. So they have a secure bike facility for that as well. It's a separate bike room with hanging.
I'll just have to teach
Maybe
people
just
that.
as a quick follow-up before any online questions, like if you had a developer who wanted to build on Main Street but didn't want to do ground floor active because the market is just not there in many regards, that would then be the kind of thing that could be approached through a variance.
Correct, because that's a development standard as opposed to a design standard. So yes, so that would be a variance.
Thanks, I just wanted to
Correct.
see if there was a pathway to.
Always, there's always a path.
always a path,
Yes,
yeah.
but yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear that.
Yes.
Good question. Yes, does anybody, Chair Ed Commissioner Garvey, and I think Greg Humor has left the room. Any questions?
No comment, good safe. Thanks, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great, thanks. And if you do have questions, say, hey, Laura, I have a question because I can't see you all. Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, awesome. All right, and then Vera will get it back to the presentation. All right. Okay, so now we're gonna move away. I really am pressing the button.
Now, it'll probably speed ahead.
Exactly. Vera?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Anybody got any questions?
Are there middle housing number goals, quantity goals for development?
You know, we're trying to produce a certain number of housing units. It's kind of hard to predict because it's really up to the folks who own their own property to decide if they want to redevelop it. So we're not in the game of getting, people to actually asking people to redevelop. So we need more units, but we just have to wait for redevelopment to happen.
And the supplemental to that then, you say we need more units, but you also say that you don't know. But could you know that you don't need more units? It's not a crazy question.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
But it's my question, it's like,
Yeah.
if you build new units, people will come and fill them up, but if you don't build new units, people won't come and fill them up. So you said we need more housing, so how do we know how much and where's that coming from?
Yeah, we need more housing, mostly because we know that the whole state is underhoused, right? So we're short, 60,000 units, I think that's about right. And so just for the people that live here, which when we're short units, that means that the housing that we have is way more expensive.
Understood,
Yeah.
but if we built 60,000 here, would that be the end? Would that be the limit?
No, probably not. I don't think so.
Either, no.
Right,
I think we're making our own stew.
We've
here.
been making our own stew. We'll probably keep making stews for a long, different kinds of stews.
Unless and until we say we are full, I have enough, or this is enough.
Closed?
We're I don't know.
We're putting a wall around
Yeah,
the city?
Well, no, I don't go that far, but at some point in time, hey, we've got plenty. Thank you very much. We don't want any more. We're done. Thank you.
I don't know when that moment would happen. I guess we'll just have to kind of go through time. All I know right now is that we do have a shortage of units.
Says who? Says the
Says
governor?
the state.
Says the state.
So there's all
Not
analysis that
Milwaukee.
they do.
I think economists and all sorts of, I think, other
It's not
folks are
just
saying,
Oregon, it's nationwide.
yeah.
Well, I know, it's even.
He wants a wall around Milwaukee.
No.
Saying it's
Well,
nationwide.
I think
No, that's not even a wall. I'm just saying.
that we live in a really desirable place,
We're
right?
creating our
We have
own
the
future.
coast. Well, people want to move to the coast, right? A lot, and that's true on the East Coast and on the West Coast, right? Like those are where the amenities are. That's where people want to be. We have jobs here. We have good infrastructure here. We have good public transportation here. We've created this place. And also we have natural beauty. I mean, people were moving here for a very long time. That slowed down a little bit. And so I don't know. I would hope that we would want to continue to see the people here prosper and grow. And that means that we need to have jobs and we need to have housing for the people that want to move here.
So it's a philosophy, it's a strategy.
It's a philosophy.
But it's not sustainable though. That's the next question. Could we do it for 10,000 years?
I'm going to be long dead.
Me too. But if we think that it's the way to go, then it should work for my 7 generations.
Well, I think that it just changes over time. I mean, what we're doing changes over time. For a long time, we did not build enough housing. We did not allow these smaller units to be built in lots of places. If you look at the city of Milwaukee, we've got 70% of our land was zoned for single family housing. That was part of the problem, is that we allowed that to stay that way for a long time, so no one could, and that's true in a lot across the whole metro region. So people could not afford, people that wanted to move here could not afford, or even people that have
Our
kids.
kids.
The kids here, the grandchildren here, like kids here, they can't afford to buy a house either. They live here, right? And so we didn't provide enough types of housing at enough different income levels over time historically. And that was a philosophy. That was a philosophy. The philosophy has shifted and we're trying to accommodate more people and make it more livable here. And so I do think that philosophies morph and change over time. For a long time, we had one philosophy and now we have a different philosophy.
So we don't have a number for Milwaukee. If you say we need more housing, if we had this many housing, then we wouldn't need more right now.
I mean, we do have a housing production strategy.
We do.
We do have some targets. I can't rattle off what those numbers are off the top of my head. Vera might
We do,
is
no,
skilled in that sort of way.
We do have a housing production strategy. We're required to do one by the state. It's called, there's a housing needs analysis. Its first step is housing needs analysis. And everybody in the state of Oregon over a certain size has been required to do a housing needs analysis, and that's based on the forecast. And so how many people are going to be moving here over time, based on how many people have been moving here in the past. It is based on backcasting in some ways instead of forecasting, so it's a little tricky. So the whole metro region has to do this housing production strategy. And so we have to look at, do we, based on our current forecast, have enough housing units? And if we don't have enough housing units, what can we do to get those housing units? And so we do have a number that we have to meet according to the state right now. And so we are projected to meet that. We will meet that. With the exception of some of the high density housing, we will be able to meet the numbers that we have been given by the state.
This year,
No, not this year. It's over a 5-year period.
5-year period.
But the caveat to that is that then also what's happening now is that we've moved into a model that's also coming out of the state, is that a lot of folks for a lot of years, not Milwaukee, a lot of different jurisdictions have not been making their housing numbers for a long time. So they are underproducing units. Milwaukee has not necessarily been guilty of that. We've been actively over the last 10 years really trying to increase our housing units. Lots of folks around the state have not been producing the amount of housing that is necessary to house the people that need to live in those communities. And so the state has basically said, we're going to ask you to be accountable to producing the amount of housing that you say that you need to produce. Because for years, folks haven't really, quite honestly, been held accountable to making sure that that was happening. So now we've entered into this whole other, state legislature, when now we're doing a state housing needs analysis along with a regional housing needs analysis. So we have to look at the entire region and understand, are we as a whole, as the region, producing enough housing? And then we will be given numbers that we need to meet as part of the metro region. Those numbers are still being developed now. And so I don't have the answer to that question of if we're going to be meeting those targets at the moment. Right now, for just our housing production strategy, we are going to meet our targets.
And it's dark in a way, so that they could say, Milwaukee, you're good at increasing density, and this neighborhood over here is not, so you take their density over to your place, and the region will be happy.
No, that's
probably going to be the opposite. I think
That's
it'll
exactly
be
right.
Milwaukee, you've done a great job. Oak Grove, Gladstone, Lake Oswego. Now we're going to get the stick out and bang away at you for a while.
I heard that, and then you said that region thing, and that went away from my hearing, when you said, no, they'll do a region thing instead of just.
No, but within that region, each jurisdiction will have allocations. So I think exactly, Jacob is correct in saying that there will be the communities that aren't producing the housing, they will be held accountable to the units that they're supposed to be producing. Milwaukee will meet ours.
Have that in the past, and our meeting now, right?
We're on track.
On track.
We're not meeting it at this moment, we're on track. So, all right, I'm just gonna.
Greg Hemer has his hand up.
Oh, Greg Hemer has his hand up. I didn't see his.
No, that's why I'm telling you right now.
Okay, sorry, yes, okay. I will go, okay.
I just wish to say something, considering this from like a historical perspective. There's always going to be fluctuations within which areas are growing. And there's going to be times that the pressure is going to seem like we cannot meet that capacity any longer. And naturally, that will cause development to slow. There's only so much that an infrastructure that a community can handle to where it loses an appeal. And I think that we are not anywhere near having that sort of issue. I think that when you look at parts of Southeast Portland where the density and the overdevelopment in some corridors and then the pressure on the transportation system, that is getting at, I think that's kind of the fear, is that we're going to turn into something like that. I don't think we are anywhere near that.
And that's a good thing to
And
maintain,
I agree with that.
and not go towards that other model.
I completely agree with that.
Okay, good.
And I
Glad to hear
don't
it.
think that so I'm a historian by trade. And I think that one of the things that you also have to remember with how this development occurs is that this is private land and people have few options in modern society today. There are few options to truly create an immense amount of capital. There are few options for people to create ways to retire, to create ways to give money to pass down to their children. And one of the only ways that people can really do that to create a large amount of money quickly will always be to divide their land, to build on their land, to find ways to build additional units. You can't tell people they can't do that because we want to stop the number of units to a point.
Only if by zoning and by.
Oh, certainly, and they have to meet certain requirements of those. And those requirements are there, the actual design requirements, but people are always gonna want to divide their land, to create more value out of their land because it's their asset and they wanna make the maximum amount of money that they can off of it. So I think that's something that with this middle housing, I think one of the things I really appreciate about it is that a lot of these parcels of land have older homes on them They have large lots. Some of them used to be farms. Some of them, it doesn't make sense for it to be a farm anymore. Some of them have already been partially cut up. But the point is that they are going to want to make value out of their land. And having the design guidelines that we have in place allow us to have a certain level of control over how that looks, how it occurs. That people are always going to want to divide their land. And there's never going to be an opportunity where we can say, oh, we've hit X number of units, we can't divide further. We can't build more, we have enough. It's not just going to be, do we have a number of units? People are always going to want to individually make more value on their land.
It's still scary though.
It's scary,
You
but-
go out several generations in the future, it's not sustainable. But yes.
And well, if you look at places in Europe or, places that have been developing for thousands of years and the amount of density that they
Have
eventually
density and then they're surrounded by farm fields. and
Yeah.
these little-
Well, we have urban growth boundaries and things like that in our communities that help with that, but it's just something to keep in mind is that eventually the division has to occur to continue to make value. And I don't think that that's something we can.
I don't know, okay.
Greg Hemer, I can't see you, but I hear you have a question.
Well, no, I just, my comment was to Charles, and I understand where Charles is coming from, but the real answer is the amount of positive growth, right? Or if there's negative growth, it's going to slow down the housing and change the housing needs. And the other thing is truly infrastructure. So how much can the city of Milwaukee or any town, right, be able to maximize before their water, sewer, and all those other things until they implode or they need to be improved? So to really answer your question, it boils down to infrastructure, right? And it boils down to migration, either positive or negative, right? And that's what's going to control the whole thing. Right now, we're in, most of these towns have capacity with their infrastructure to be able to do this. And we're seeing positive growth in population. But until those two things happen, by the way that the laws are written, you won't see any change. Does that make sense, Charles?
It does, that should be correct, but if you remember, Happy Valley caused a crisis in the school system and the infrastructure being schools. There was an absolute crisis and that created another round of correction. So planning, that's your department, so I think there was none at that time. And
I can't speak for Happy Valley.
in that area, pardon?
I can't speak for Happy Valley.
No, I'm not speaking for them either. I'm just saying that someone, the county commissioners, who approved all those toilets and all those people and all those kids and all that wonderful development, didn't think about schools or wastewater at that time. That was not a problem, not a priority.
I think that, and
We are
probably,
required to do that.
probably need to
Well,
move
you're
on,
required,
but
but they didn't.
I think some of that as well was the city of Happy Valley made an intentional decision to grow, and they annexed and they built.
But it was approved by the county commissioners.
It might have been approved by the county, but it might have also been approved by the city, because I remember some of those times. I don't remember all the ins and outs. And, yeah, it probably did create some issues, but also when you have development, people are paying for new sewers and paying for new roads and paying for new parks and
It's all
things
after
like
the
that.
fact, so it's important to keep that in mind when you're doing these things. Yeah, okay, so you can fix these things after the fact, but if you create a crisis for us today, then that's not fair.
Well,
People
I
have been
think,
paying their rates all the
yeah,
time.
and I think maybe one last thing before we move on is, I think as Laura has said a few times, that we're built out. And I think to make that clear what she means there is, unlike Happy Valley, which is a great example. Happy Valley was like a little city right here with all this greenfield development around it, all this farmland. And what they did was they annexed and then they built. We don't have those choices. It doesn't exist. We're completely landlocked. City of Portland, Happy Valley, unincorporated.
I'm not saying we do, I'm just saying that's an example of.
So I think some of those risks are mitigated by the fact that we've already basically built out to the edges of our city, and the only way you're gonna see more development is people dividing lots and putting smaller things in, or lots getting raised and kind of building up from
In
there.
the city of Milwaukee, we're already required and do up to, we talk to the school district, every couple of years to make sure that whatever they're forecasting in the schools, that we're in cahoots with each other, so we know what to expect and how many people are gonna be in the schools. We also update our water plans, and we update our stormwater plans, and we make sure that we have the capacity for what the growth is. And so we're actively doing that here in the city of Milwaukee.
Glad you are.
Yeah, yeah. All right, and with that, I think we will go back to the PowerPoint presentation. See what we've got coming up. So I think I talked a little, so long-range planning. So we talked a little bit about development review, and we're going to talk about long-range planning. So that's the other thing that we do. So we do the development review, we look at applications, we go out, and so say something comes in, it's a cottage cluster and it didn't need to go through land use. The planners will go out there and make sure that the site is meeting all the requirements in our code. So they're still doing that, they're looking to make sure that what's being developed is still meeting our code out in the field. So anyway, but the other thing that we do is long-range planning. And again, we were talking about that before, the transportation system plan. We've been working on that plan for over 2 years now and continue to work on that. And I would encourage all of you all, there's a big exciting moment coming up in the transportation system plan is that we're finally to the project phase. And so we've been working for a long time to get to the project phase. And so if you pay attention to Engage Milwaukee over the summer, there will be project lists. And so you can see what is under consideration based on a lot of the work that's gone on with an advisory committee made up of your neighbors that have been really involved, including the yellow and back. Affordable housing code incentives. One thing that we try to do, this goes back to the housing production strategy, is trying to figure out how we can incentivize developers to build more affordable housing. So we look at our code and see if there are ways that we can do that. And so that's something that we're doing now. Also, like I said before, we're looking at our natural resources code. And then also, again, another thing that is long-range planning that we've been doing a lot of that we did for a long time is we don't know what's coming out next from the state. I keep talking about things that have been coming from the state and that they're still going. So I don't know what's going to come out of the state, and so we'll continue to do projects that are required by the state. And those are projects, all of those things, they take years. It's like development review has to happen within a certain time frame, but the long-range planning can take a long time. So I'm going to just step back for a second, and this kind of might help a little bit about the framework within which we're working. And we've talked about this already, really, is that we've got the state policy that drives what we do. Then we're also within the metro region. And so we have a metro regional government, and we work together collectively as a region to decide what kind of development we want in the future. And then also the thing about the regional policies, that is really dictated by our urban growth boundary. And so I don't know how many of you all know or don't know about our urban growth boundary, but just to highlight, so back in the 1970s, there was a decision made. Folks were seeing what was happening in California. California was sprawling out. A lot of other places were just sprawling. It was eating up all the farmland. Oregonians decided that they did not want to see our farmland get eaten up. So they drew a line around the metro region, and they drew lines around Eugene, and they drew lines around Salem. We drew a bunch of lines around urban areas and said, we're going to focus all of our urbanization within those boundaries. And so we are in one of those boundaries. So the whole idea is that we go up, we build more units here so that we can keep our farmland pristine. And if you go out, and so that's the difference between, like, we are not next to the urban growth boundary. We are landlocked here in Milwaukee, right? You go out to Happy Valley, they bump up against the urban growth boundary. Sometimes folks can ask for extensions. They're called urban reserves. The state's gone through a process to designate urban reserves. Those places can be held, it's like for 50 years, they can be held in urban reserves, and you can ask for, you can ask to go into those lands. Milwaukee doesn't have that. So the whole idea, though, is that we keep growth contained so that we can have our beautiful Willamette Valley. And so we do that across the state. But then also here in the city of Milwaukee, we get to make some of our own choices. We don't just have to listen to what everybody says, but we get to make some of our own decisions. And that's what gets into
When code packages, we talk about code that comes to the planning commission gets to weigh in on it. We get to ask, you get to come and testify about it. So there's multiple layers. We have the most complicated land use system in the country. If you did not know this, no one has this. Oregon is super unique. No one has these layers of complication. And I think that if you look at other states, if you go to Texas, if you go to Florida, you see it's madness. It's rampant development. There are no limits to what can be done there. That is not true here. And I would rather live in a state that did have these limitations that does not have these limitations. So where it was very intentional to build Oregon like this. Oregonians a long time made that decision, and they continue to make it over and over, that we want to keep Oregon beautiful. So what all of that comes into play, and then like I said, the city has their own way of approaching things, right? So one of the things that the city council did back in, I think it was adopted in 2016 with their visioning process, what do we want the city of Milwaukee to look like over the next 20 years? And so the city council adopted a vision statement for the city. And you can see that online under the city council's pages. So then coming out of that, we had to develop our comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is responding to the statewide planning goals. So it's all about its economic development, it's transportation, it's sewer, it's water, it's natural resources, it's economic development. We've got 16 goals that apply here in the city. There was a 2-year process that went on with an advisory committee and lots of public outreach that developed that comprehensive plan. That's kind of what drives a lot of decision-making and a lot of the work that we're doing now. That's been driving the work that we've been doing because the city collectively, the community members came together, and ultimately the planning commission, and with the planning commission, it went through the city council. So we have this comprehensive plan that guides our development. So if you ever want to look at all of the goals and policies for the city of Milwaukee, those are in our comprehensive plan. Then that gets translated into our zoning map and our land use. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. Oh, look, I had these cool little fancy things. There they are. Okay. Okay, so here's our zoning map in Milwaukee, right? So this goes back to what is land use plan. This is talking about what goes where, right? So if you look at all of that yellow land, that was all single family housing primarily. And so now middle housing allows all these different types of housing to be built in the yellow areas. Then when you've got the blue areas, you can see those are the industrial areas, right? You've got the industrial here, right? Then we've got downtown, which has its own unique set of standards. And you've got high density residential, where you're allowed to have more units in those zones. They're very small, a number of zones that we have that in. And so we really have very few different kind of zoning types. I mean, Milwaukee's pretty small. And so basically, how do we know what can be built in those different zones? Then you go, that translates to the Milwaukee Municipal Code. So that's when we're talking about the zoning code. And so that's the thing that I wish I had my big book, because the big book is like this big, and that's where all the rules are, right? And so where we focus, you can see there's a lot of different rules in here that doesn't have anything to do with like what planning does. So what we usually focus on is Title 17, Title 16, and there's a few other that we do things in Title 12. And so that's we work with the engineering department. So most of our work is focused around the rules and regulations that are set forth within that zoning code that tells you what you can do in each of those different zones. What's permitted outright, what may not be permitted outright, but you may be able to do if you follow some different rules, what the standards are, like what the setbacks are from the front line and the backyard and the side, how tall buildings can be, what kind of window treatments you might need, what kind of design elements you might need in your developments. So all of those rules are laid out in that video, or you can just look at it online because you don't know able to carry around that picture, but it's online, it's super easily accessible. So again, there's these two different things. There's things that are permitted by right, and then things that go through land use approval. So things that are permitted by right, meaning that planning commission doesn't review these. I don't review them. It's single family, single dwelling units, middle housing,
multi-unit housing, if they meet the standards. Again, it's always if they meet the standards outlined in the code. Commercial uses in commercial zones, industrial uses in industrial zones. If you meet all those rules, you can just go forth and do it, as long as you go through the building permit to get that. And so then there are also things that need land use approval, right? And so those are things like conditional uses, community service uses, parks, hospitals, schools, vacation rentals. That goes through a process. Sometimes some land division proposals, although we did change this and now subdivisions don't actually go through a land use process, so I'm going to strike that. And then variances. So those things are land use processes. And so you can't just do those outright. You got to come talk to somebody at the city about it. You got to fill out a land application. And so a land use application. So there are 5 different types of land use reviews. And this is kind of where the meat of the technical stuff, it's in the weeds, but it's kind of important. So type 1, there's 5 different types of land use review. Type 1, basically it says, there's provisions in the code, I could just say, yep, you met it, we're good to go, check. That's like some land use approval, like we're talking about land use approval extensions. That is a type 1 review. I get to look at it, no notice goes out. We just make the decision because it meets our code. Type 2, basically those are these middle housing land divisions that people have started to see. Those are type 2s. Also fence heights. There's a lot of fence heights variants, and a lot of fence height variants in the city, and we get to talk about those internally. We notice them, and then, but there's no, it doesn't come to planning commission. And so also, like if you want to reduce your setbacks by a certain amount that you're allowed in the code, I can also approve that. So it's all about, if you do the things that are allowed in the code, I can generally sign off on them. Now, where it gets different, where things change, so there's type 3, type 4, and type 5. Type 3 and type 5 are the things that the planning commission see on a regular basis, okay? So type 3, you get to, there's like, so vacation rentals. The planning commission sees more vacation rentals, although we've only got 8, I think, in the city at this point. But if you're gonna have a vacation rental, you can do an Airbnb or whatever, they're gonna come through the planning commission. If you want to get a building height, you want your building to be higher, you want a variance of some kind, you have to come through the planning commission. If you want to vary for the standards and you're building a house, but say your setbacks, you need them to be less than the code says, you've got to give us, you've got to fill out a land use application, make your case, and then bring it to the planning commission to review. And those all do get noticed. So if you've got a type 3, then you get notified, folks within, the NDA gets notified of that, and also properties with 300 feet. And so public hearing, that means that it's a public hearing. So folks can come in and say how they can testify about the land use application. The thing that they need to do, which you always need to remember, is you need to testify based on the rules in the book. It can't be about how you feel about it, because the rules have already been made. If you want the rules to be changed, that's like a separate process. But when you're talking about the rules, it's actually a legal proceeding. So everybody has to judge the development by the criteria. Except for when you get into downtown design review, which is a little bit trickier because it's more discretionary. And so planning commission is the decision maker on type 3s. So this board, you folks, these new people, you're going to do a lot of type 3 reviews. Then there's type 4, we don't get a lot of those. It's one specific thing, they're called planned developments. Waverly Apartments was a planned development, and Hillside is a planned development. That's a type 4. Those are the only 2 that I've had in the last 4.5 years. So it's a rare thing that comes in, but that does come through planning commission, does have its own unique set of approval criteria. And then type 5 is these code amendments that we're talking about. So back all the way to House Bill 2001, Governor's office said you all need to allow middle housing types. Our code did not allow for those, so we had to go in and change our code. And we went through a long process. We took 2 years of doing outreach and talking to folks and going out and talking to folks about these code changes, and then bringing them to the planning commission. And then ultimately with type 5s, The planning commission either recommends approval or denial to the city council, and then the city council is the ultimate decider. So there's lots of different types of land use approvals, and the ones that you will see at the planning commission are generally type 3 and type 5s.
Type 5s, another way of thinking about the type 5s is those are the rules.
Those are the rules.
Right, and so it's like if we're changing the rules, at some point they come through planning commission on their way to city council to figure out what the new rules should be.
That's exactly right. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, because that's when the rules get changed, right?
So
Yeah.
just on that mindset, so basically type 3 are when we're applying rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Type 5 is making the rules.
Yeah, type 5 is actually. Okay.
And with type 5, we generally already have a bunch of rules. We're just revising the rules. But it is making rules, but we have a lot of rules, and we go in and we say, what are the rules that we have for this thing? How do they need to be revised?
How do the rules meet our goals and our vision, kind of go back to those kinds of documents to figure out how the rules should change.
But that's that's a situation where you have a proposal, a development. Somebody wants to build something.
No.
You go into type 5, no?
No, that would be type 3 or
So
type
you just
4.
come and say, hey, I'd like to change this rule, and up it goes to type 5, just like that.
No. Generally, the way it works is so when developments come in, they have to follow the rules in type, and that's type 3.
Yeah.
But so say if you could, if you wanted to, you could say, I would like a zone change. You could change your zoning. You could say, I don't want to be this residential zoning. I want to be commercial zoning. But you would have to go through a whole process to ask for that. And then it would only get approved if you followed a lot of other things like our comprehensive plan. So there's a lot of hurdles to get through to kind of changing.
Would that be a type 5 then?
Yes, and that happens very rarely.
Okay, so you have to have a project, you have to have a reason, something in mind to get to type 5 to start off.
Well, how it happens primarily is that there's something that the city is trying to accomplish, or the state is asking us to accomplish through type 5.
So it's city generated usually.
It's 99% of the time.
Okay.
It's 100% of the time since I've been here. It's city generated, state generated. It's the city saying, because we say we have a policy in our comprehensive plan that says, well, actually, even before House Bill 2001 came along and we were required by the state to allow middle housing, our comprehensive plan said we wanted to allow middle housing. The community had already said that they wanted to allow middle housing before the governor told us that we had to. So we were on that path already. So if you look at the comprehensive plan, like that's what we're in the process of implementing. So for instance, with the transportation system plan, we know that in our comprehensive plan, it says we want more bikes and we want safer infrastructure for everyone who wants to use our transportation system, that includes cars, that includes bikes, that includes pedestrians, that includes people and, strollers, that includes all those people. So our transportation system plan has said we want to accommodate all of those people. So then we go in and we would make changes if necessary to make sure that we are doing that. So it's really kind of these longer, bigger processes. Like, again, natural resources is something that we're working on right now. We needed to change the rules around our natural resources. We knew that we needed to do that. We needed to do that in order to meet some requirements. And so we're going in and do that. So 99% of the changes come through plans and processes that the city has, in fact, that visioning and that comprehensive plan has said, go forth and make these changes. And so what we try to do then is when there are big changes that impact a lot of people, we try to go out and talk to people about it. So when we had middle housing, we spent a lot of time going out and talking to folks. I don't know if you all have heard about neighborhood hubs. If you've heard about neighborhood hubs, the community said, we want more areas within the city, little commercial areas where we can walk and bike to. And we want that to be safe, and we just want to be able to do that closer than having to go downtown. And so the community told us that. And so then we had to go look at all of our zoning within the neighborhoods, and if they were commercially zoned, and say, how can we make these little areas, like say, the corner market, the blue store, the little blue store, it's one store. Is there anything that we can do to kind of liven that up? Is there anything that we could do, not that the city could do, because the city isn't telling property owners what to do with their property, but it's letting the code be more flexible to give them a little bit more options to what they can do on their property. So when we did that project, we came out and we went to the NDAs, we went around to the places where the hubs were, and we said, hey, this is what has been proposed, this is what people are thinking about, let's talk about that. And so then we took those proposals after we talked to the neighborhoods about them, and then we brought them to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission would do that, and then we went to City Council. So it's things we're just following our comprehensive plan for the most part to try to implement changes to the zoning code in addition to what's coming out of the governor's office. So that's kind of, is that?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Back to what you said about there being 8 Airbnbs in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I bet there's more than that.
Not that we know of. There are 8.
So those are the vacation rentals. So those are homes that someone doesn't live in, but the house is just being used as an Airbnb. So that's a vacation rental. That's the conditional use. But if someone were renting out, they live in their house and they rent it out for short term.
Okay.
Those Airbnbs, we have more of those. Yes.
So, but if somebody is a landlord and they are renting their home, and they decide, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm turning this into an Airbnb, do they have to tell you?
So there's rules on short-term rentals, so you can only rent out for a certain period of time before you become a vacation rental, and you have to go through that vacation rental process in order to do that.
So yes, they have to tell us. So they have to register and they have to tell us, they have to come before the planning commission. They have to say, we're gonna meet these rules that are outlined in that code.
Okay.
And they have to prove to us that we're gonna meet those rules.
Right.
And we work with the applicant to make sure that they're gonna be able to do that. And if for whatever reason they can't meet those rules over time, then we can always revoke that privilege. We haven't had that happen because mostly people are following the rules. But if for some reason somebody wasn't following the rules, we can remove that. We cannot allow them to do that anymore. So there are rules in place. Okay.
And code enforcement pays attention to it. I do know that as someone who rented my house out when I went on vacation for a short term, and then I didn't get my permit renewed, I got a nasty note from code enforcement.
They're watching.
The city's paying attention, yeah.
Okay.
It was a polite note. It was fun.
So the basis for how land use decisions are made, I think this is just kind of going back over and continue the type 3 and type 5. Like I said, we work with the applicants to bring an approvable project to the planning commission. So say these guys over here that want to do this food cart pod, we work with them a whole bunch before it ever even makes its way to the planning commission. And then the planning commission gets to review that. And then also people can send in their testimony and say, no, I don't think this is a good idea. I think this is a good idea. And then the planning commission can approve or deny it. And the thing about those proceedings that when you're in the type 3, it's illegal. It's basically like being in a courtroom in some ways, right? Because it's a legal proceeding. There's certain rules that you must follow. There's certain times when people can speak, and it's all outlined. The chair, Jacob, was doing it for years. And now Chair Edge is going to be doing it. There's rules and they have a script and they follow it. And so it's kind of this thing where you kind of just have to wait till your turn to speak is, and they will let you know what it is. And they're very organized, well-run meetings. It's a very legal proceeding that happens.
Can you talk about the last point on this?
Yeah. Yes. Well, we've kind of been talking about, so this is a good, okay, so right. So if you get this notice of public hearing, like you've probably seen these. If you're in the NDAs or if you've been 300 feet, you get a notice of public hearing. So on this, there is applicable criteria. There is a box on your notification that tells you what criteria that is going to be used to evaluate the proposal. And so when you come in to testify, you need to look at that criteria and make sure that you are sticking to the criteria and that your argument is saying that the applicant is not meeting that criteria in some way. Because, like for instance, with the rental, some folks aren't super happy about having an Airbnb next to them. And I get that, I understand that. But if their application meets the rules, then the planning commission actually has to allow that. So even if you're not happy about it, if they meet the rules, the planning commission is going to vote to approve it because they are required to do so. If they don't meet the rules, if an application doesn't, but we work really hard to make sure we don't bring applications to the planning commission that we don't think will meet the rules. And if we don't think they can meet the rules, then we will ask the planning commission to deny the application. Which we've done. I mean, we have done that. So if you are not going to work within the rules, we won't bring you an application that we don't think is approvable or we'll recommend denial. So we work really hard to make sure that the rules are being followed. And if somebody wants to make, there may be cases, there's some cases where it's a little discretionary, mostly with downtown design review. It's a little bit different with downtown design review because you can, and that's this area, right? Because we're trying to get something very specific here. And so you can either follow the rules with your development, follow the rules, or don't follow the rules, follow the guidelines. And the guidelines is where there's a lot of, let's have some conversations about what did that guideline intend? This food cart pod, there's nothing in our design guidelines that says that thing meets our design guidelines. That our design guidelines were written before food cart pods were a thing. So they had to make the case to staff first, and then we recommended approval, and then planning commission was thinking about not recommending approval because they didn't go with staff's recommendation. They said, no, we're not buying this. We don't think you meet the approval. And so we had a long discussion about that, and then they went away. And then they rethought about their application. The planning commission came back, and then ultimately it got approved. But because it was discretionary, there's a lot of conversation about that. That doesn't happen very often. It only happens usually when there's a discretionary element, and that is mostly with downtown projects. And a lot of projects don't want to follow the rules because they're trying to do something a little bit different, right? And it doesn't always fit square peg and round holes. So some of them do go straight to permit, but not all of them. So far, we see most of them.
Any questions?
Yeah, is there any questions? Yeah.
So if they, let's say that they agreed to the guidelines, but they're not following, they're starting to build and they're not following the guidelines, who polices that?
So they have to, you have to follow what's been approved in your application. If you do not follow what's been approved in your application, you can't get building permits.
Correct.
Because staff, Vera or Brett, goes out there and says, no, your setbacks, you're way too close, or you're way too far away. Not you're way too far away, you're way too close. Then it's like, you have to stop.
Okay.
So
please, Vera.
Well, so, because when so even for the food cart pod, so they submitted plans with their land use approval. That's what was in the conditions of approval, is that your plans will substantially conform to the plans that were approved as part of the land use review. When the construction documents come in, I review those, and they need to document for me what they may have changed and why. And we evaluate, is that still substantially compliant with what the planning commission approved? When you put together construction documents, things move around, maybe a window gets, we try to kind of figure out how that's going to work. But once those construction documents are approved, that's what they have to build. So field changes sometimes happen, but then we work with the building department. But so we're constantly paying attention to make sure that what was approved is what in fact gets built.
They are under your UI right here.
I'm looking at them all day long. So yeah, exactly.
All right, so this is also just so you know, you can always find out about all of these applications. They're all posted online. You get noticed. The NDAs get noticed. If you're in 300 feet, you get noticed. If it's 300, if it's a type 3, a lot of folks that do land use applications, land use review, they come in for a pre-application conference where basically they meet with staff and they talk about their proposal, and then we say, oh, you need to think about this, you need to think about this, you need to meet this requirement, you're not meeting the setbacks here, you're not doing here, and then they make changes. And all those pre-application conferences, if a pre-application conference has been held, that conference notes are posted on the website. So the land use applications, the notes are posted, the hearings posted, the hearing, the staff report's posted, the application materials, everything is posted online. And so if you ever have any questions about any of the developments that have gone through a land use process, remember, not everything goes through a land use process. But if you have any questions about anything, it also has the staff person that's responsible for writing the reports and kind of shepherding the application through the process. And sometimes it's Vera, sometimes it's Brett, sometimes it's Ryan. And so call them if you have any questions, because they're more than happy to answer any questions. It just makes everybody feel better, I think, when we like to be able to answer questions, we want to be able to give you information. So please feel free to reach out.
Maybe I also want to reiterate that for planning commissioners as well.
Yes.
Like, pick up the phone, call if you have questions. I mean, the amount of time I've spent talking to Vera or Laura or any of the folks like over the years, it's been really helpful, I think, especially as you're prepping for something. So both for community members as well as planning commissioners who are community members.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime you have a question, just call staff. It applies to everyone in this room. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see. I think I've kind of gone through this. This is about the testimony, and when you want to come in, you can always. So once all of the materials have been submitted and a planning commission hearing date has been set, and the staff report is posted online, you can always comment on that application. Remember, think about the criteria. You can comment either in writing, and if you write something down in writing, that will go to the planning commission. Every single comment that comes in comes to the planning commission at the hearing. Or you can show up and testify at the hearing during a certain portion of the hearing, and you can testify in front of the planning commission. So those are just two different ways to do it, to testify at a hearing. And that is for type 3s, 4s, and type 5s. And for anything that goes to city council, well, that's more complicated, because if you don't have standing, then you can't testify. But I will get into the details of that. I will explain it to you if it ever comes up. Okay, and I think I've already talked about this. Just it's a legal proceeding, and there's a certain, I talked about that. I won't go through that. That's an example. And then again, that's it. City staff, city webpage, Engage Milwaukee, city staff, city website, and then Engage Milwaukee for all the long range projects. For all the big projects that are going on, there's usually something up on Engage Milwaukee. There's opportunities to send comments, look at maps, ask questions of staff. That is true both for you all and for any planning commissioners. And with that, that's kind of what I've got for the joint portion of the meeting.
Laura, can I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Heemer.
So I'm going to use a very specific example, which is almost the only example I can think of, is that there is a development on Home Avenue that was passed by the planning commissioner, by the planning commission for access to a road, because the original plan was for only 4 single houses. And then the rules changed. And if the rules change after a planning commission or after a ruling is made, is there a process to go back to the planning commission or to go back? Does it become a type 2? Does it become a type 1? If they follow all the new rules after after it was granted by previous rules?
In this case, they are allowed to go back in and change the number of units that are being developed. There were some conditions that were put on the street in that regard. They still have to follow those conditions. But for the units and required parking at this point, if it's allowed outright, it's allowed outright. But if there were other particular conditions about that particular little stretch of road, then those conditions would still need to be followed.
Right, but my question is, the rules changed, though, from the time that the planning commission heard it to the time that the new rules were put in to add in those extra units. So I guess my question is there a process that gets put into there because the rules changed, or is it just the way that it is if the rules change?
The rules changed, so that's just the That may not be that may not be the answer that you were looking for, Mr. Hamer, but I think that the rules did change so that they're allowed outright at this point.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, yep, okay. All right then, any other questions from any of the NDA folks? All right, well, thanks for your time. I hope this was useful. Okay, good. And if any of your NDAs would like us to come and talk about any of these, you know, to kind of give a shortened version of reviewing the land use process, we've done that several times over the last several years. And so we're happy to come out and do kind of a different but same version of this presentation with the NDA. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Really
you.
appreciate you.
Bye.
Thanks for taking time to join us.
Meeting for one long.
Yeah.
On for midnight.
I think there's a cutoff.
There's a cutoff at 10 o'clock. Okay, you're ready.
No, we got our work cut out. Yeah, good to meet you guys. Thank you. Might see you out here.
And then 11's like hard stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're getting kicked out.
Yeah, listen, I'm always dead by 10 o'clock. I'm a morning person, right?
Thank you.
Oh, you're gonna be tomorrow.
We have
Here, I think there's only like 2 more slides on there. So I guess the question for you all is, do you all have any questions that didn't get answered, or do you have any questions?
Can you put out that?
Yeah, it'll be in the meeting materials, yes. Yeah, you'll have it.
So I should reference.
Yeah.
It's been incredibly helpful. I mean, obviously, a lot of these things I was aware of and I read through and kind of got started, but it's nice to hear it reiterated. I also think it's really helpful to hear it because you phrase things slightly differently, you know, for different audiences.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that you said today that were phrased specifically to this audience that actually helped me understand it a little bit better. So that was really nice.
Right.
Just hearing things all
Yeah.
different ways can help.
For sure. Yeah, because it's really complicated. And if you don't, I mean, it's a lot to take on and digest, right? Until you kind of get into it, you don't fully understand what all of it means. And so this is just like a prepper, and then we'll be in it together for quite some time. And if there's any questions about any of it, how any of it works. Also, the other thing that I didn't get into was like, there's, on development review applications, there's clock timelines. Right, so we are required by the state to review applications within a 120-day window, meaning that an application comes in and then we work with staff to deem it complete. Sometimes we have to work a lot with applicants because they don't give us complete applications. So it goes like with these guys, like working with the developer to get, so the clock starts once an application is deemed complete, right? And then we've got 120 days.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's 120 days to get not just to the planning commission, but get all the way through an appeal process at city council. So when you see things on the planning commission agenda, it's because we have an obligation to get things on the agenda because we're working under a clock. So that's just one thing to know. There's another thing, some of the other timelines are shorter, but it's not really about land use applications. It's something we have to deal with internally. Like we have to look at middle housing land divisions more quickly than we do development applications, because the idea is that trying to get the land divided so that people can move faster to build middle housing, but that's a detail. So that's just one thing to always keep in mind. Like sometimes we'll be in meetings and it'll be like, oh, we're gonna hit the 120-day clock. We need you to extend. We'll ask applicants if they can extend the timeline so that we have enough time to review the project with you all and with city council.
So for that historic review.
I think we did extend the clock on this, yeah.
But that had to get approved, you had to ask the applicant if they were okay.
If they will
Because the city
waive it.
can't force them to
So
do it.
what would happen in a situation if you
We
asked an applicant?
deny it. I
We
mean,
would just-
you just
yeah.
deny it.
Yeah.
That's what you do. It's like, well, if this isn't doing what we.
Which is why most of the time they
Yeah.
can't, right?
The applicant go back, those are their options, either we extend this or.
We don't ever really kind of say it's gonna be.
I feel like there's been one or two where we've been like, we probably need to extend. Otherwise, if you can see how the planning commission is talking about this, the likely outcome is it'll be denied. And at that point, they're like, we'll extend.
Yeah. Yeah, we do, and we do that with some regularity. And then there's some other little things that you'll learn as you go through it. There's these awkward, like where you have these 777, 777 continuations.
Yeah.
So basically, when we're in a tricky spot and we say, well, we need, the applicant needs 7 days to respond to some of the planning commission's questions. And then we need to let the community have 7 days to review it. And then staff needs 7 days to analyze whether or not we got to where we needed to get to in the beginning. So you'll see sometimes we're going to continue this hearing to a date certain in like 21 days, in 3 weeks. So that we run up against that sometimes, because sometimes that's the legal requirement. It's actually spelled out in state statute how we do that. And we'll explain it to you during the hearing. But so if that comes up, just know that there's a little process that we have to follow. Yeah.
And ultimately that, Laura, that speaks to kind of the points of what the first evidentiary hearing is all about, which is really providing an opportunity for the public to contribute testimony and evidence into the record. And so then legally, if anybody shows up at that hearing and requests additional time to review the materials, as long as it's the first evidentiary hearing, we legally have to oblige that request. And that's where the 777 rule comes in, where we allow more opportunity for testimony, written testimony to come to be entered into the record. So then we can come back for a subsequent public hearing, like Laura was saying, at a date certain, 3 or 4, some odd weeks in the future, where we can then deliberate over the evidence in the record and render a decision, based on that evidence. And so, again, a lot of times we do try to get things done in one hearing, in that first evidentiary hearing, but really that's, we try to build it into the timelines to allow for, this possibility. But, again, the most important thing is that we are making the record open. We're allowing everybody from the public the opportunity to contribute evidence into the record so that we can then have an opportunity to review the evidence and deliberate on it, whether it's that first night or some other night. So I just wanted to, point that out while we were on the topic.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Edge, because I think just maybe to also underscore one of the things he said briefly, I feel like it took me a minute to figure it out. Anyone can come to the hearing and ask for it to be continued. So that's just, it doesn't come up too often, but when it does, it's one of those things that, as was kind of mentioned, it kind of throws you into a scramble of like, all right, we're not, we might finish taking some public testimony that night, but then we're not going to move into any deliberation because we're going to keep the record open so everyone can provide additional context, and then we'll move into deliberations at a future date.
That's right, because the applicants that ask can keep the record open. Planning Commission, yeah, they have different.
Or a community member who's angry could ask to keep it open, so they could provide more testimony based off of what they heard that night or something like that.
And it has to be on what they already have heard. They can't bring in new evidence. It's based on what they've heard that evening. But we'll explain all of that when it happens. Just know that those situations do come up.
If you're under like a time frame in the 21 days or a certain amount of time, would the planning commission meet at an impromptu time to accommodate a time crunch? Does that make sense? Like,
since I've been here, we haven't been in that situation. We've been able to manage it.
Okay, right.
So I suppose if we were in like dire straits and something happened, I'm sure maybe we could figure something out. We could have a special meeting. It just hasn't happened. We tried it.
I can refer to one time in history where this has occurred. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on a Thursday.
Oh.
Right. Okay.
And it was actually before I was on the commission. And it was an application for a plan development at what was later the Bonaventure site that was approved and is now nearly done being built. That was a plan development application, and it had a lot of testimony. And so the Planning Commission agreed to have a special meeting on a Thursday in order to accommodate all of the public testimony and interest in that particular application.
Well, thank you for providing that. So that was in 2018, Chair Edge?
17. 17.
So it doesn't happen very often,
Right,
but
right.
occasionally it might happen.
And we would certainly see it coming.
Oh, we would see it, yes, it would be
Spicy,
coming.
you know
just
the
straight at you.
spicy thing was headed our way. Yeah.
And it's also, I think, we can collect evidence into the record. I think even without a quorum, we can accept testimony, but we can't take action. Like we couldn't close the record, or we couldn't, deliberate and make a decision or whatever without a quorum. So if we ever had a special meeting on a Thursday and we weren't able to get, everyone wasn't able to attend, we usually provide the opportunity for commissioners to watch the video, review the evidence, and still participate in a future hearing, as long as they disclose that, in light of their absence, that they had reviewed the material in the record.
Yeah, that's another good point too. I think that we've had instances where a planning commissioner wasn't there for the first half of the public hearing. Like I think you were there for that.
My first and second meeting, yeah.
Right, and so Commissioner Pennick, he said, I'll go in and I will watch the video and I will come prepared to the meeting to participate. So you can't, even if you weren't the first one, as long as you watched the video, read the materials, you can participate in the second meeting. So, and we'll remind you of that or ask you if you are going to be willing to participate.
I think that kind of thinking about a continuance and what Chair Edge was saying about the first part of the hearing is an evidentiary hearing. I think that's where, I think you see that the most in a continuance, where you really realize the first part is about collecting the evidence, pausing, asking your clarifying questions, and then the next part is about the deliberation space and the decision making. And I think when you have that all in one night, sometimes those lines blur, but I really do think the importance of, in that initial evidentiary space, is the place to ask your clarifying questions and to really, and it's in the chair's script and talking points, to try and refrain from the rhetorical questions, from the deliberative kinds of statements. Otherwise, I think we've been doing a pretty good job of it as a commission. Otherwise, you will get Justin who will chime in every now and then, shut you down. You're talking about things you shouldn't be talking
Yeah, I've
about.
always seen
Save
this
that for the second part.
Gray area with the deliberation.
Yeah.
And clarifying questions versus deliberation.
Totally,
for sure.
exactly. So,
And the chair will usually has been really good, along with Justin, in guiding everybody through that
yeah,
process.
I think, especially I think during my time as chair, I would try and nip it in the bud before Justin had to get involved. Justin used to have to get involved a lot, and so I think I kind of took more of an active role, and we'll see how Chair Edge and Vice Chair Graytrick want to do things, but I just kind of wanted to kind of talk about that because I think it's just an important piece of the protocol.
And then I think since we're on the subject of Justin, he would want me to just make one plug. I think the most important thing about the hearings is that it's the applicant's hearing, right? This is something that they have come to the city to ask to do with their property. It's their hearing. And so we need to be there for them and to respond to them and work with them. But it is also the community's hearing, but it's really about somebody trying to do something with their property. And if they're following the rules, they get to move forward. And so it's just kind of to keep in mind the applicant. It's like with the historic resources. Those folks is the applicant. They were coming in, they were telling their story. They're telling why they want to do this. They're giving you all the reasons. They're explaining it to you. And so it's their story to tell. In a lot of ways, staff is there, it's support, set it up, but the applicant plays a big role because it's their property. They're trying to do something on the property. And so we're just here to kind of help them through the process.
And while we're touching on the legal kind of topics, I think this is a good time for me to bring up something that, I think is important for, kind of an orientation, planning commission orientation. And you'll kind of hear this if you do, if you kind of go, I think it's the Oregon Planning Association and DLCD, I think have put on a planning commission training that, you can either participate in or maybe you can watch it. I'm not sure if there's a recording available, Laura, that you could share. But one of the things that's really important, even as we get into, first of all, with our probing questions, our clarifying questions, as we go through and our, during the part where the record is open, where we're, gathering evidence into the record, we're acting as a panel of judges. And so we're supposed to be objective. We're not supposed to bring, bias, into, the deliberations. We're supposed to review the evidence and review it against the criteria and then make a judgment, a very dry, objective judgment about whether or not the evidence shows that the criteria is complied with. And that's ultimately our job during these, during the hearings, the type 3 hearings. Our decisions can be appealed, and they can either be appealed to city council or they can be appealed out to the state, depending on, I think, the type of application it is. I think often it would be appealed to city council, as a type 3. And the important part about that is, again, if it does get appealed to city council and perhaps appealed out to the state, in either LUBA or the Court of Appeals or beyond, that they can look at what we rendered, the basis for the decision that we rendered, and kind of point out where we made errors. And so if we're making an error in judgment, or if we're bringing bias into a decision, and making a decision to deny or tacking on a condition of approval that's not substantively based on criteria that applies in this particular review, that can be appealed out to and overturned, and the decision can be overturned. And while maybe we don't get penalized for that, it costs the city money to go through the process of going through each of those layers of appeal and to defend a decision that isn't legally sound, is not a responsible use of the public's resources. And so we want to make sure that we're focused on the criteria and focused on making, to the best of our ability, unbiased judgment. And that again applies, I think, importantly to the probing and clarifying questions that we ask, and also the topics of our deliberations. So we want to make sure that we do not even give the impression that we are basing a decision off of anything other than the applicable criteria. And so while this can be a really interesting role to serve in, and you can get these applications and they sound really interesting, and you might want to ask all these questions about why did you come to this decision? Why did you come to that decision? Who's going to live there? Or is it going to be affordable housing? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? It may, if it's not based on the criteria, then that could be something that if there were an appeal down the road, they could single out those questions that are based on things other than the criteria and say, look, they are, they're basing this denial off of things that don't apply to my review. And that's something that we just want to make sure that we avoid. And so my guidance as a senior commissioner, at this point, is to make sure that you focus your questions, clarifying and probing questions, as well as really the focus of our deliberations on only the applicable criteria for any given review. And to, try to save our curiosity questions or, other kind of policy focused questions perhaps for another time. And so that's, really the guidance that I have, and the request I really have of each of you as new commissioners, and even Jacob as a senior, fellow senior commissioner, is, we need to stay on topic and make sure we're not even giving the impression that we're making decisions for other reasons. So thanks Laura for giving me the opportunity to kind of say that.
I was just going to say, thanks, Joseph. I really appreciate that. And I think that the place for those curiosity questions is calling staff. To kind of be like, hey, why is this thing framed the way that it is, or this suggestion framed the way it is? Like half the time, or more than half the time, Laura, Brett, Brian can all answer that, whatever the curiosity is. But I think trying to avoid getting into some of those, as Justin sometimes calls them, design charrette questions from the dais. Ask that stuff in advance. You can probably get it answered, and then you can focus in on the criteria and is it meeting it.
Yeah, that's totally correct, and I just, I wanted to make a pitch though too. So that's all great for the type 3s, but then also we've got these type 5s. And so what we'll get, and I didn't even mention that they won't be hearings, they're just work sessions, right? And so when we get into doing code revisions, before we come, we never come to planning commission unless it's extenuating circumstances. We don't come to planning commission with code that we haven't had a work session on. So we will talk to you. So like coming up for the Affordable Housing Code. That one's a little strange because it's going a lot through city council because they have very specific things that they want in that code. And so we're working with them, and then we will bring a version of that code to you, and then you will review it in a work session. And then there'll be a hearing, and then we'll send it up to city council. Some things don't go to city council first. They'll come straight to you all. And so we'll talk about the code provisions. And that is sometimes when you get into like, why'd you do this? What is this trying to accomplish? And and you can do that in a work session. A work session is much more wide open. A lot of times, no one shows up except for planning commissioners to work sessions because they're really technical in the weeds kind of things that we do. So
Type 5 hearings are also places where, unlike Type 3, where we can't talk to each other before the hearing, Type 5 applications, policy making, those are places you pick up the phone, call someone else if you want to talk about something. Joseph and I have spent a lot of time talking to one another about comprehensive plan implementation when we were going through zoning code changes and talking about trees and ADUs and all the things. So Type 5, kind of those rules go away. You can have.
You never have a quorum.
Yeah, you
never
never,
be.
yeah.
Or we can't be together and having a conversation about type 5, right?
Yeah.
But for type 3s, yeah, if you don't talk to each other about it here.
Is there a time and place when you can act as that community member to provide feedback on a project about the design or something outside of what the application criteria is? When a project's asking for public comment?
There's really not, unless it's discretionary and you have questions about what they're proposing. You can't ever, as a community member, or even as a planning commissioner, ask them, well, did you consider this? Or why didn't you do it that way? By the time it gets to the planning commission, you can only ask them questions about what is in front of you, not about the could or should or would haves, right?
Yeah.
So there really isn't that opportunity to provide feedback on designs ahead of time.
There have been times where I think as individuals or groups of individuals, planning commissioners have taken positions with city council on things we think council should work on.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll write a letter and see who wants to sign it or things like that. I think in some ways you kind of trade some of those community member perspectives for like having a seat at the table where you've got a different set of rules to play by.
And I think too, there are developments that will go out to the NDAs and talk about the development, like for Hillside. Hillside spent a lot of time talking to the NDA about that development, right? And hearing people's feedback. And so there are projects, I think, that might end up being questionable, or people might have questions, and the developer does have that opportunity. They're not required to.
Yeah.
But if folks ask them to, then maybe they will. It just depends on how far along they are in their process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Laura, before the Design and Landmarks Committee was decommissioned, wasn't there an opportunity for like early design advice from that group for applicants in the early parts of the process?
Yes, there was. There was that opportunity for the Design and Landmarks Commission to meet with the developer to kind of talk about the design. That changed. We decommissioned that group because we made a lot of changes to the code. So we thought that the code would be developed to get us the kind of development that we wanted to do. And so it's baked into the code. Or so that either follow the code, we made a bunch of changes to the code, hopefully to get the kind of development that we want. Or if they go through the guidelines, then that comes and it becomes a discretionary conversation with the planning commission. There used to be more discretion with the Design and Landmarks Commission. Part of the issue was that with the Design and Landmarks Commission, we were required to hold meetings with them. It was complicated to manage because we're such a small community. And so there weren't a lot of times that people would be coming in to look at these developments. So you can't keep kind of people ready to review things because they weren't doing it very frequently, yet we were still meeting with them. So it was just it was a controversial decision and a hard conversation to have.
And Julie and Ryan will probably never forgive us.
Yeah.
I have names.
Here they are now.
I was wondering if there might be an opportunity, you know, to, you know, I don't know how it would work legally, but you know, if there was some opportunity to, you know, substitute the planning commission for the DLC, you know, in that kind of early design advice, you know, process. You know, I know it happens very rarely, but since there's no DLC anymore, then it's the planning commission, right? And so, you know, and while I agree with you in terms of us trying to get the code right, there's still a place, I think, for early design advice. And I'd like to, disappointed that went away, that there's not an early design advice option from a committee of community members for applicants, you know, that are looking to build downtown. Primarily, I'm assuming this is, you know, where that would apply. But, you know, to kind of, I don't know if there's an opportunity to provide, you know, that again, you know, with the planning commission, but it'd be really kind of a cool role, I think, for this group if that was something that we could, you know, structure soundly.
Yeah, I can't really respond to that now, but I think that there would be, it wouldn't keep the record clean if the planning commission was acting as the design commission before they were actually seeing the application and the hearing process. So I don't actually think that's feasible.
I know that's kind of what I'm hung up on too, but I'm not Justin, and Justin's not in the room, so I was, you know, wasn't sure.
And we had many long conversations about this, and it wasn't something that was done lightly. And I think that for now we're going to keep it the way it is unless the tides turn in some way.
One question, someone asked about that for just my peace of mind, and I will drop it. Time to come. Is there an opportunity to, this is a two-part question, it's a question with a little bit of reasoning why I want to know. Is there an opportunity where we could at some point reinstate a design and landmarks type commission? My question asking, because there are two programs that I think some folks are interested in seeing if we could ever be involved in. A more formal Main Street program or a certified local government.
Yep, and we've been involved in that in the past.
Yeah, well, we are not a certified local government.
Not now.
And we can never be one if we don't have any sort of design commission. So I'm just curious, and you know, if there would ever be an opportunity to consider having some sort of design.
There would be that opportunity to have council ultimately made the decision to decommission it, so that would have to be taken up with the city council. Yeah. Well, speaking of another group that's awkward, we can talk about the committee for Community Involvement Advisory Committee for a second. So there is that little meeting space on the agenda where we're supposed to meet as the CIAC. And so that was another thing. So basically how that came about was in 2021, we added the role of the Planning Commission as the CIAC to the bylaws. That is because when I got here, there is, so there is the requirement by the state for cities to have a CIAC. And so when I got on board, kind of the directive, and it came through the comprehensive plan, was that we needed to establish a CIAC. And it's really described in the staff report, I think that I gave you all, that it's a committee that needs to be looking at public engagement efforts, specifically around land use. There's lots of public engagement efforts that go across the city that don't have anything to do with land use. So it's specific to the state requirement, it's specifically about land use. There was a lot of conversation from a lot of folks, including the planning commission. The planning commission really felt that the CIAC should be larger than just land use, and that it should be about community involvement in the city generally, and that there should be a committee that was established to be that body. The city council at the time decided that they did not think that that was necessary, that we've got a lot of community engagement going on around the city. At the same time, we were also establishing the equity steering committee, making sure that we were engaging folks in underserved communities, and that we have representation there, and that there was not the need to establish a full committee that would require monthly meetings and staff time and a charter. And basically, developing a whole other committee is a big lift for the city, and it takes a lot of staff time and a lot of staff resources. So at that time, the city council said, let's change the bylaws for the planning commission and have you, the planning commission, wear that hat, and that there would be time on each agenda item to fulfill that role. Now, since that time, that has not really happened, in that there hasn't been much for the planning commission as the CIAC to discuss. When we do get into discussing, it's like what you would look at is if you were wearing your CIAC hat, that would be like when we started the kickoff of the transportation system plan. We gave an overview of the whole community engagement plan. It's like, did we miss anything? Did we get it right? Do you have any feedback? And then we would go and we would, if we can, alter that engagement plan. We have engagement plans. They vary depending on what the project is, right? So we also have an engagement plan for hubs. And so we talked about that engagement plan with the planning commission or / CIAC. We don't have a lot of those big engagement processes, which is part of the reason that the city council did not actually assign a whole nother committee to it. So what I've been doing is looking at all the other cities in the region to see how they are handling this, because it is a state requirement. And what I'm learning is that almost no other cities hold time on their agenda every meeting for the CIAC. That the role of the CIAC is baked into the planning commission, and that at any time, if anyone needs to bring up anything with the CIAC, you can bring it to the CIAC. Since I've been here, since we established the group, no one has come in to talk about any engagement plans or concerns about that, because we've been really open talking about engagement with folks. So I think that there's some committees that do have completely separate community engagement committees, but they're not planning commission, they're appointed by city council, they're entirely different. There's only like 2 that I've found in the whole region. So one of the things that I have been thinking about, and we don't have to figure this out tonight at all, I'm just saying that I think that because we don't have enough big long-range engagement plans for the CIAC to be reviewing, and because we haven't seen people coming to us asking about engagement, I think that it may be unnecessary and not required for us to hold time on the agenda on every planning commission meeting, because there's never anything. So, but I think that there may be a way to revise the bylaws that we fulfill our legal obligation with the state. And then also, we will still continue to come to you all, the planning department, with engagement plans. We would do that even if you weren't the CIAC, we would come to you with those engagement plans. So that you all get to look at the engagement plans and review the engagement plans. So we would continue to do that, but that we could not possibly hold time on every single planning commission meeting for the CIAC. I think I could do that in the bylaws, and you all could still fulfill your role. Yeah, I think that when I got here, there was an understanding from the previous planning director that this is something that we needed to do it a certain way, but I've kind of learned since then that that isn't necessary to do in our case. And the great news thing about this committee, it's
it's baked into goal 1, which is a statewide planning goal, and they're getting ready. I think they're talking about redoing goal 1 because goal 1 actually needs some help. It's not been updated in a really long time. It's really outdated. So I'm hoping that eventually they're going to update goal 1 because I think there's just a lot of changes. And I think that with the CIACs across every jurisdiction I've worked in, it's been very unclear as to what that role is and how we should be fulfilling that role. And it's been a struggle and with lots of different communities, as I understand. So I think I'm probably, there's also the other thing is that we're supposed to be updating the bylaws to be more in line with all of the other bylaws of the boards and committees in the city. So I would kind of do it in a, update them to be in line. So just little tweaks, not anything substantial. And so I'm imagining that I can bring some bylaws back to you to get updated within the next, I don't know, 6 months to a year.
Would that be a type 5 review?
The bylaws, no, but the bylaws would have to be approved by city council.
Okay.
Yeah, so any changes to bylaws go through city council, yeah. Commissioner Garvey or Chair Edge, did you all have any questions regarding that? Sorry, I can't see you.
I have no questions.
I have no questions about that, but there has been so much information coming through tonight. I'm going to have to rewatch the presentation probably a couple more times to take it all in. So I appreciate the thoughtful presentation though.
Yeah, no problem, Commissioner Garvey. And if at any time, any one of you want to sit down with me and like go through any of this and have any deep questions, just call me. I will sit down with you. I will answer any questions that you have. I'm more than happy to do that. And yeah, I'm always.
The one question I did have is, I thought I heard someone ask this, do you have this slideshow somewhere? Just because there was some really helpful tables in there that I'd like to be able to like review or just have on my, like, as like a quick reference sheet.
Yeah, for sure. I will send it out to everybody. I'll just put it in a PDF and send it out to everybody so you'll have your own copy. It'll also be included in the meeting materials for this meeting, but you don't need to dig back through that to find it. I'll just send you a PowerPoint. I'll just send it to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And everything also lives on the website, milwaukeeoregon.gov. If you find the calendar, you can click on the planning commission and there it is too, just as reference.
Yeah.
And there's normally two, sometimes three things. There's normally an agenda document, and then there's normally full meeting materials, which also includes the agenda.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, Chair Edge, I think I'm finished with this portion of the meeting. Unless I say no one say, I want to talk tomorrow. Does it want to go home?
I think I had more questions, but there's only so much I can,
Process, yeah.
I think it's good to take some time in between processing and asking additional questions.
Yeah, and if we need to have any follow-up, we could set aside, we could say, we're going to talk about we're going to take 15 minutes and talk about some outstanding questions, or call me, so we can decide whichever is best. I'm happy to do either thing. Yeah. Okay, cool. I hand it back over
All right,
to you, Edge.
Thanks, Laura. Well, this is a good orientation. I appreciate the effort that that you put into this, Laura. So thank you for all of this. I'm glad to hear the questions that were asked, and and for sure, please feel encouraged to take Laura up on her offer of having subsequent conversations or email exchanges in order to answer any other questions you have. And then as well, Jacob and I, as senior members of the commission, could also field some questions if you had anything that you wanted to ask us about. So we're always available, as well. So please keep that in mind. So speaking of the CIAC, this is the part of the meeting where we act as the CIAC. So let's see, actually. Oh, the script is written basically for the part that Laura already did. So does anyone have any questions about the role of the CIAC? And then there's no one in the audience anymore, is that correct? Okay.
Is there anyone online?
Then
No, there's no one online.
then we will move on. Do commissioners have any other items for discussion?
Chair Edge, I was just gonna quip that until we change bylaws, everyone gets a fancy CIAC title to add to your resume for the remaining months. So, note that for yourself, or whatever that's worth.
Add it to the
Two committees for the price of one. Okay, great. Then let's see. Were there any other items for discussion from the commission? Hearing none. Laura, could you give us a forecast?
Yeah, so the forecaster, so our next meeting on April 22nd, we do have the Natural Resources Code updates. And so I did say that I would send you all just kind of the link to the materials from before. Don't feel like you have to read them, because we'll send out a whole new staff report, but there's been a bunch of work sessions that happened because it's a type 5 Natural Resource Code. We had a bunch of work sessions with the Planning Commission before everybody was here, and so I'll send you links to that. It'll also be in the staff report. Brett will bring you everything on the 22nd. And so then also on the 13th, we've got 2 type 3 hearing items. We've got a vacation rental. And then we also have the Chase Bank here downtown. They they wanted a variance to one of the design standards. And so that's one of those instances where they would need to come to the Planning Commission. And so the next 2 meetings, we have got items on our agenda. And that's it for the forecaster for now.
Chair Ed.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Chair,
yeah.
just in terms of forecaster, would like to remind folks as we're in spring, looking towards summer, if you have any vacations planned or anything like that, just let Laura know as soon as possible, because scheduling meetings in summer can get tricky with vacations.
Yeah, and as long as we have a quorum, we just have to have 4 people for a hearing. So, but it is a really good idea because it does get a little tricky in the summer. So just let me know if you know. And if you decide to go out of town, on a whim, that's okay too.
Yeah. Zoom in.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep in mind that's always an option. We recognize that you're on vacation, but at the same time, it is a great tool for being able to fulfill our public service from wherever we happen to be, and really under whatever circumstances we happen to find ourselves in that might make it hard or impossible to join the group on site. So. But for sure, make sure that you're as much as possible communicating ahead of time with Laura about any planned absences. So thanks again, Jacob, for bringing that up. Okay, then I think at this point I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All right.
Aye.
All right. Looks like it's unanimous. Let's go. Have a great night, guys.
Good night.